Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. Today, should Twitter allow political ads? We ask what role social media plays in politics and what impact a ban on political ads will have. Join the conversation, tweet us at AJStream or leave a comment in our live YouTube chat, and you too will be in the stream. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey recently announced that the company will no longer allow political advertisements on its platform. The move, the company says, is to make sure politicians and political campaigns tell voters the whole truth. It's the first such declaration by any social media company and stands in stark contrast to Facebook's policy. But will the prohibition actually prevent the spread of misinformation? Well, joining us to discuss this in Hyderabad, India, Divya Kalabhavani. She's a journalist with The Hindu, where she covers technology, entertainment, and lifestyle. In London, Tom Jarvis, he's founder and managing director of Wilderness Agency. That's a social media strategy company. And in San Francisco, California, Jessica Alter, the co-founder and chairman of Tech for Campaigns, an organization that helps political campaigns build a digital strategy. Welcome, everyone, to the stream. It's really good to have you here. Tom, I want to start with our online audience, our community there. We tweeted this out to our viewers not too long ago. Have you seen a political ad on Twitter? Let us know for this show. You can see the results there, 1 day left for people to actually vote, but the yeses, 59%, and the noes coming in very close after, 41%. So based on this unscientific poll, but poll of our viewers, Twitter political ads don't seem like they were making that big of a splash online anyway, with many people not being able to recall seeing any, myself included in that. How big of a deal is this decision, this Twitter decision, in your view, and does it matter?
Hi, yeah, I think it does matter. I think it's the first step for any big social network like this to ban political advertising. From a monetary point of view, from a financial point of view, the numbers went great for Twitter. So in some respects, this is a great piece of PR for them. They were only making, £3 to £4 million last year on the 2018 midterm elections. So from a platform point of view, I think it's a really good move in terms of trying to drive more positive conversation on the platform. And it's a really great PR exercise. This really reminds me of where Lyft were a couple of years ago when Uber were having such PR problems. So I think it's a really good move from a PR point of view, but less so in terms of the financials. It's not a real burden on Twitter as a platform.
It's interesting you say that. Seth here, one of our community members, tweeted, "Mark is just for the money," referencing Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, while Jack is socially responsible. Interesting takeaway from that. Jessica, I could see you smile at that. Would you agree that this is just a PR move, or does it go beyond that? Is there something of substance that we can take away from this move?
I mean, I'll address the tweet first. As a percentage of Facebook's revenue, political ads are a drop in the bucket. I think, it's much higher than Twitter's, but that's because Facebook makes, many times more, exponentially more money than Twitter. So I think they announced in the last 2 weeks that it's less than 1% of their revenue. So this isn't for money. They've definitely lost money on trips to Washington, lobbies, and fines. So I don't think political ads are super ROI positive for Facebook at this point. And I would agree that it's mostly a PR move. I would go one step further. I'd call it a sleight of hand. The issue on Twitter isn't paid reach. The issue on Twitter is an organic reach problem, and I'll put organic in quotes, bots, etc. So they basically solved a problem that they didn't have, and then shined the spotlight on Facebook. And so, the issues that are on Twitter are still there, and they're as bad as ever. And, bravo to them on a sleight of hand PR move, but it doesn't make a difference, A, in the political space, or B, in solving any problem that Twitter actually has.
So I want to share the decision. Of course, it was sent in a Twitter thread from Jack, just so our audience is all on the same page. This was that decision. We've made the decision to stop all political advertising on Twitter globally. We believe political messages reach should be earned, not bought. Why? A few reasons, and Jack goes into it. It's a whole thread, but we pulled out this one here. While internet advertising is incredibly powerful and very effective for commercial advertisers, that power brings significant risks to politics, where it can be used to influence votes to affect the lives of millions. Divya, I'll direct this one to you. It's that idea of wanting to change this influencing of votes. That seems to be what's coming out of this tweet here. What's your take on that?
I believe there's definitely a sway that the digital space definitely has. And like Jack said, he talks about paying for reach, which is really what he wants to address. And in this sense, these ads does, undermine the integrity of political discourse at its core. And not that lately there has been much integrity to it. But honestly, whether this is a good move or a bad move, I just believe it doesn't really address, the main issue, which is online literacy for a lot of people. People will have to know whether they should trust that ad. And there's not enough information for people out there to, especially the 300 million users on Facebook and the 40 million users on Twitter, just in India alone. We need those resources.
Can you give us an example, Divya, of what you mean by a lack of digital literacy? What would that look like in practice?
So obviously, there's the big phrase that everybody likes to use, fake news. And just today, actually, Twitter posted to their blog about synthetic manipulated media. And that's the kind of content that, does have the power to sway. And once you monetize that content, the reach is absolutely, it's unprecedented. And I think that when you take advantage of that, there's definitely repercussions that other people need to. And people don't know, obviously, what the consequences of paying for reach is. And they will take things for granted. A retweet maybe is an endorsement. And I think that resources on how to differentiate the real from the fake is important.
If I could just jump in. Sorry, if I could just jump in, 2 points on that. Divya was saying, about paying for reach, and Jack is saying about paying for reach. But I think what we just talked about 2 minutes ago is that no one is paying for reach on Twitter politically. $3 million is almost nothing when it comes to political ad spend. $9 billion was spent in the 2018 just U.S. elections, $9 billion. Only $600 million of that was actually online. So $3 million is absolutely nothing. And so no one is paying for reach on Twitter. That's the thing. The problem is earned reach. That is the problem. So the other part I would say is I agree with Divya that users need more information and transparency. But what I don't agree with is just that, okay, so then we should have a ban. No, the answer is let's have more information and transparency and figure out a way to do that. Mm-hmm. When you do a ban... Sorry, I'll just finish this thought. Mm-hmm. When you do a ban, you should think about the people that actually suffer. I think everyone is so obsessed with what we call here the top of the ticket in presidentials and even some Senate races. But Talk for Campaigns works primarily with state legislative races. And it's those races and lesser well-known candidates and less wealthy candidates that are going to suffer if you take away political ads. Donald Trump is going to be totally fine. He's got tons of money. He can get his money to TV, and he can put it in much less transparent places. It's incumbents, it's reality TV stars that have earned reach, and it's wealthy candidates that are going to be fine after this ban.
Tom?
Yeah, well, I think to address that, I think, the numbers banded around for Twitter are usually around the 2018 midterms. I think that 3 to 4 million figure was the major political figures in the midterms in the US. But this problem is systemic. 300 to 400 million worth of advertising next year on Facebook alone from political individuals. That doesn't include all of the conversational advertising. So I do think Yes, those figures are low for Twitter, but I do think this ban does have an impact. And I do think, some of the steps that Twitter are making now to look at the conversation on the platform and try to make it more positive are a good step forward. Though this does feel like a good PR exercise for Jack at this time.
But Tom, I want to pick up on Jessica's second point via this chart here from Quartz. Twitter spending by candidate, and this is data that comes from Twitter, and you can see some of the top U.S. presidential candidates here. They're spending, this is just in the thousands, right? And you scroll down a little bit, and this is ad spending on Facebook. It is in the millions. So you can see the discrepancy there. And of course, Jessica mentioned that President Trump could just take his advertising elsewhere. As of right now, elsewhere could be Facebook, because there was $15.7 million spent on ads from January to October 2019. So what do you make of this point? You say that there's it's a good thing because there is something happening, a change is happening, but does it make an impact if Facebook isn't making that change?
I think there's 2 points here. The first point is that Twitter have not just banned advertising from political figures, they've also banned political topics. So they've banned advertising around key topics that political figures or groups related to political organizations can advertise against. So the numbers banding around are small when you look at individual campaigns, but when you look at those overall topic data for advertising, it's a bigger group. So they are making some commitment, and I do think that's a great first step. The second point about Facebook is very interesting. They've gone very quiet on this, as have Google, and it's well known that they're making a great deal of money and will probably make more from this step from Google. In terms of, do I think they're going to make a move? No, I think, we've seen a long history now of Facebook stepping back on these things, waiting for the PR storm to ride itself out. And I think they'll do that in this case. I think they're in a position where they see this. Sorry, go on, jump in, Jessica.
No, I just want to clarify. Facebook is not making a ton of money from political ads. It's just not the case. Like, it's a ton of money when you say 300 to 400 million, but when you think about their overall revenue, which is in the many, like 30 billions, it's just not a lot. It's not a high percentage of their revenue. So I just want to dispel this myth that has been restated twice now, that Facebook is doing this for the money, or Google, who seems to not be in the conversation as much, but no one's doing this strictly for the money. If you were just to make a business decision, then you would probably get out of political ads, because the cost to them on PR and branding alone is probably not worth it. But it's just clearly not about that. It's about something bigger for the company and probably Mark. And I think I just want to go back to my earlier point, which is they realize, and it's been told again in the last 2 weeks with the Stanford study, that there's about 10 times as many state political candidates advertising online than on TV. And they concluded that one of the biggest impacts that digital political ads have had is just the sheer number of candidates that can now get their message out and hence actually have a chance to contest an election. It's actually, the biggest impact will not be on presidential candidates. It will not be on the candidates that you and I all know by name. It will be on these smaller candidates that don't have a way to get their message out. Still in the US, almost 70% of campaign spend goes to TV. So if we end digital advertising in politics, that money is not going to go away. It's just going to go to a less transparent place that's harder for many people to access. And then again, you have incumbents, wealthy candidates, and people who have, quote unquote, earned their reach, which is mostly reality TV stars, that are going to be having an outsized advantage.
Because they have the follower count anyway. I want to pick up on the point that you made about this not hurting those at the top necessarily, but the smaller candidates. We got a comment from Shamim Zakaria, the foreign editor at Global Times. Here's what he told the stream on that point.
I do not think it served the purpose of deterring the spread of misinformation by politicians. In reality, the big political players do not need Twitter ads to amplify their voices. They already have enough followers who can make their tweets go viral organically. And any sensational tweet by a big politician, irrespective of the information peddled is true or false, it is most likely to find a place in the news. So this makes the entire idea that political message reach should be earned, not bought, a questionable one.
So, Divya, I'll give that one to you. He says that this is not going to hurt the people that it's perhaps intended to target. What do you make of that point?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with him when he talks about, the existing follower base. Just last week, we had a very prominent person here in India who said that there was gold present in cow's milk, and a lot of people were ready to make life-changing financial decisions because of it. So there is a genuine threat to society, and these are life-altering decisions people are making at the sake of what somebody says on a whim on a public forum. And I think that so there's an ideal and very utopian notion that in an ideal democratic society, citizens should have access to all facts in order to know what kind of society they should be living in. But that's just not true. That we live in the real world, and misinformation exists whether you ban ads or not.
Mm-hmm. Picking up on that, this is from someone watching live on YouTube. James Fox says the problem isn't that they are removing political ads, more so that they are allowing falsified information of opponents of political positions here. Nodding your head as I'm reading that is Tom. Tom, you're nodding your head. And it raises a point that someone made a little bit earlier, that this isn't necessarily about the money. I think, Jessica, you made that point. So what then is it about? Because our community and our viewers say what this should be about is not allowing things that are blatantly false, fake, not true to be on these platforms.
Yeah, I think that's a really complex issue. The spread of misinformation. We're in a storm now of misinformation across digital platforms, and this ban by Twitter doesn't go far enough to affect that, I don't think. We've just seen this week in the UK with the starting of the general election, the Conservative Party being brought up for a doctored video of a Labour candidate. So we're seeing these tactics used across the board, misinformation and doctored videos and content that's clearly untrue, being used by political parties all across the world. So I think really looking at the effects of disinformation and how this information is being spread, I think is a really important part of the job now of these platforms. This is a first step, and I think it's a good one, but it's a really small first step.
I agree with
Tom.
Divya, you go first, and Jessica, you finish up after.
I definitely agree with Tom. There's definitely a threat, but I again emphasize my point earlier made about the literacy of tools that Twitter netizens need to understand misinformation. And again, yes, a utopian concept that people will always know what's fake and what's not. So I think, yes, while the ban is a small drop in the ocean and barely a slap on the wrist, we need to really understand what the real issue is, and that's access to the real resources, the real facts, the real conversation, and we really need to work on that for sure.
Jessica, before you jump in there, I wanted to share something with you. Maybe might make people think. This is one person's view on how to do that, how to create that literacy there. On Twitter, he says, if the issue is the danger that fake news can be easily peddled by political parties, why not regulate those kinds of ads instead of a blanket ban that affects even legitimate political ads? So that's one person's view. He's not alone. This is one other that I'll share with you on Twitter. Telhare says, it's not a business's job to regulate lying politicians. Since Congress, in her view, is full of liars, Congress should enact laws that regulate the lying of politicians. Congress expects Facebook to do what it doesn't even do itself. So regulation, where do you fall on that? Who should do the regulating?
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I think he said it's a complex issue. It's definitely a complex issue, and I don't think there's the solution yet. But a ban seems like sort of a lazy way out. And as far as regulation goes, I think there's sort of two sets. I think the platforms, Facebook gets all the attention, but actually they've done more in terms of sunlight being a disinfectant and showing information than Google. So I think both Facebook and Google need to do more on their own platforms if they're not going to, in the short term, fact check political ads, which TV ads in the United States are actually not fact checked on broadcast news. They should at least have a warning about that. They can include more information about, who's behind the ad and how it's been targeted that people can access without going into an own ad archive. It could be like a nutrition label on the back of ads that anyone can see very quickly. But ultimately, I agree with the Twitter comment that, yeah, we need actual regulation. And I think it's absolutely a complicated issue. It's most complicated because it's not clear who should do the regulating right now, both from a overall standpoint, but also who's actually has a staff and a makeup that's qualified to understand the issues and then actually hold them accountable. Is it Congress? I'm not sure. Is it the FEC? As we sit here today, I'm not sure anyone's actually equipped, and that actually scares me the most.
Or should it be an international body, which of course is something that is hard to think about because who would that body be? But I wanted to share this from Yunus on Twitter, who says this is a very good topic. At least politicians in countries like Nigeria would no longer have an avenue to instigate Nigerians against one another. I advise Facebook and Instagram to emulate this, but bringing the point home, Tom, that this is an international issue. So while Twitter, of course, is a company that's a U.S. company based here in the United States, it is used everywhere. So how would regulation work in that sense?
I think that's one of the really complicated things. In order to do this really effectively, we need a global regulation of this type of advertising. How that would work and who would do that is really unclear. We've tried things in Europe from a regulation point of view, and it's not really worked. So I think it's a real challenge. But what we can't do, I think, is allow the platforms to self-regulate. We tried that in the UK with the media businesses after Leveson, and it hasn't worked. So I think, we sit here today and we talk about Facebook, we talk about Google, we talk about these steps that Twitter have made. I think the reality is these platforms are in the best place to do this, but shouldn't be expected to have to do this. Really, this is for governments to look at a framework in which advertising on these platforms works.
One thing I would add to that is, I think as we sit here, it's easy to say the ban is good or bad, and political advertising is good or bad. But you have to actually define what is political advertising. It's my feeling that Twitter has not figured out exactly what political advertising means. So, of course, it's going to be campaigns, but that's the easy part. Is healthcare political advertising? Healthcare is basically the number one issue in any U.S. campaign. So that would mean Planned Parenthood is not allowed to advertise. But it might also mean like a yoga studio. Are they healthcare? It's just not clear what the guidelines are going to be. And I would hypothesize that Twitter is going to spend a lot of time not only figuring this out, but policing it.
Someone on YouTube agrees with what you're saying, saying that that is a big gray area when it comes to what is political advertising. I want to thank all of our guests, of course, for being part of this conversation. It is one that will continue, of course, because on the 15th of November is when Twitter will actually announce the regulations, and then they will go into effect on the 22nd. So lots more to keep an eye on. Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this part of the conversation. But thank you to Divya, Tom, and Jessica, and of course to our online community for your tweets, your YouTube comments, and your video comments. Until next time, we'll see you online.